The following session was recorded live in St. Louis, Missouri for the 2001 Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers. This is tape number 4, Marketing.
This is the marketing station. I'm Larry Cole, your moderator. We have Mike Seastrom, chairman of our marketing committee, and Jim Hensley, foundation marketing director. Jim will talk to you about phase 2 of the Phoenix plan, and Mike will talk to you about cooperation and growth that we see going on. I get to, pardon? It's not secure. How's that? Any better? Was that any better? I didn't think so. Are you in through that? You're not in through this, are you? Is that any better? Hello, hello, hello. No? Yes? Okay. That's probably all we got. I think how are we doing now? Are we in? In for sound now? Yes? No? All right, good. I get to speak to you just a little bit about unity, and you know, I kind of take the country boy approach to things. Unity is unity. What can you really say that elaborates on that a whole lot? Jim has spoken before, and I spoke last year at the banquet on unity. The problem of promoting square dancing and turning our trends around is going to take everybody, and that is unity. All the groups, all the organizations, all the clubs, all the dancers, all the callers, all the cures, we must all get committed to work on this together. It has to be done with unity, or it simply isn't going to happen. No faction, no group, no organization, no individual can shoot out on their own and really make anything impressive to get the ball rolling. It's going to take all of us to pull on the load to get things happening. Unity is the key. We have to all do it together. We have to all work together, and it's starting. A lot of the groups are beginning to talk to each other and work together. The foundation has gotten support from other organizations and other individuals. The unity is beginning to come. We need to continue to work to improve the unity and to push things forward. As I said, it's my country boy approach. It's pretty straightforward. You can't put a lot of flowers on it. We all got to do it together, all at the same time. Mike will talk to you about cooperation and growth that we've had, and then Jim will talk to you about phase 2 of the Phoenix plan. Mike? Mike Seastrom is chairman of our marketing committee.
Thank you, Larry. As I'm sure most of you are aware, one of the problems with unity is who takes the leadership role. And one of the problems that we've had over the last 10 years is that we shift that leadership role, and nobody really wants to stand up and take control or take charge. In some areas where we have active callers associations, where the callers are involved more in making decisions of the clubs, we seem to have a little bit more of a well-defined role in who's leading and who's following. But in areas where there's largely the clubs run the political climate in that particular area, it's a little bit more of a grayer picture of who's in the leadership role. And for many of us who have lived in those areas where there's a large dancer association population that is in the primary leadership position, it's very easy for callers to step back and to let somebody else do it. And over the years, that has proven to shoot us in the foot, as we've talked about before. The biggest problem that we have in those particular areas is that because there is nobody in a leadership role, nothing really gets accomplished or seems to get accomplished. And so therefore those areas seem to be suffering the most. Now, as far as examples of cooperation and growth, over the last year, where Jim and I have spent talking to various associations and various callers groups and various dancers associations, we find that the areas that are growing in the United States and abroad right now are the areas that, number one, have strong caller leadership. Number 2, have strong dancer leadership, either one, the other, or both. And most importantly, have a solid focus on their new dancer program. This has been the most critical key this far, is to have a strong focus and a strong picture with your new dancers. The areas right now that are focusing, and as many of you know, I've talked for probably 5-6 years now on the multi-cycle method of teaching new dancers. And one of the reasons I believe so strongly in that, because it is an entire club's or association or regional area's focus on new dancers. How do you get new dancers? Keep that new dancer program going all year round, every week, the same time, the same place, getting people to participate, using your brand new dancers as your primary recruiters. I mean, everyone knows that everyone that we've talked to is already dancing, and we've talked to everybody that we work with, all our church groups, all our neighbors, all our family people. We've conned them and talked to them enough about square dancing, and there's a deaf ear there. So when we find that we reach new dancers, those people become our primary recruiters. If they can recruit their friends and bring their friends while they're still in lessons, while they're still excited and enthusiastic about being involved in this new dance form to them, then we are more successful at recruiting newer people from there. And it's if we're involved with programs like this that get our new dancers involved in the social part of our clubs and the social part of our organizations early on, then we got a better chance of retaining those people. So we're not only finding that we're having success in recruiting people, but we're finding that we're having success in keeping those people. But there's an awful lot of areas around the United States. I was in the northern part of Utah about a year and a half ago, and there were so many callers that had retired in that area that there was literally not enough callers to go around for the clubs that were already dancing. And there was not enough callers to actually be teaching the classes. So these people were scrambling. They were trying to find, what can we do to keep our new dancer programs going? Well, out of necessity, an area like that had to stop and combine their new dancer programs with a couple of different clubs. And we're also finding that this is working for some people and some regional areas. There are areas that for many years have tried having two clubs run a particular class or new dancer program and have had a difficult time because of the politics. But over the last 5 or 6 years, because clubs out of necessity have had to do that, all of a sudden the politics get buried a little bit behind. And we seem to have a little bit more of an open feeling about these dancers are new dancers no matter if they belong to this club or that club. The fact that they're new dancers and they're going out and they're going to be our new dancers for our regional area becomes much more of an important part of the whole concept here. So we're finding that out of necessity, people are cooperating more. And I'm sure that some of you could list examples and are living and working and dancing in some areas that are in the same situation. The climate of dancing and the climate of the availability of leaders and of callers and of facilities has gotten to the point where you have to start making do and have to start using your head a little bit to see how can we make this work. And out of necessity, we've gotten to the point where we're trying new things. Many of us have heard over the years, well, we tried that before, or we've never tried that before, so how can it work? And all of a sudden we're finding that out of necessity, people are having to make things work. And this right here creates a climate where all of a sudden we're trying new things and we're testing new waters and we're torquing new programs around to see if we can't make it work for us. One of the prime areas that I see having success and that has success over the years and that is a totally underrated part of our activity is the number of callers that are out there where their main focus of their calling is on one-night parties and one-night programs. How many of you do one-night parties and one-night programs? Well, I'll tell you, for many of us that do those programs or do those parties, we find that is still a very successful part of our dance program, that it's a lucrative part of the activity, and it's also a great way for people in today's busy society to enjoy a night of dancing. And yet many callers and many dancers view that part as not really calling or not really dancing. And that mindset, and we talked about this last night on the Board of Governors, that mindset has to change. We have to understand that is almost the most critical part and the most elevated part of our activity, because in the survey that was held with StarWorks and the Internet survey, turns out that those number of adult dancers that have been exposed to dancing as an adult, those people have the most favorable view of our activity and are more likely to join us than any other group around. And so as we talked on the board last night, and as our focus turns a little bit more, we're going to have to learn to embellish that part of our activity, embellish those callers, and take advantage of those opportunities to make that a primary part of our activity. These people are dancers, whether they dance 4 times a year or once or twice a year. These people are dancers. They're experiencing our dance form. They're moving to music. It's a cooperative group dance, and we need to embellish that part of our activity as being just as important as contemporary club dancing or any other form of dancing that we do. And we can talk more later, and we can share some more experiences later, but let's hear from Jim next, okay?
I was just echoing what he said there. It is so critical. How many of you put your hands up for doing one-night stands? How many of you do more than 10 one-night stands a year? It's good. It's good. And I know it must seem like, if you've been a conventional caller, that this is sort of a step down. But it's almost like that's going to be a more appropriate concept for this bunch of baby boomers coming along, because this is a bunch of short-term, in terms of attention span people. These people, they want to have fun. They don't really care about taking lessons. They don't really care about becoming a club member. They don't really care about becoming an accomplished dancer. They just want to have fun. And they really are kind of leery of big groups anyway. They don't like groups. I mean, this is a different animal that's coming down the pike, folks, and you've got to remember it. I mentioned this in this last thing briefly. But we really don't have a choice. We taught this generation that they were around which the world revolved. Good Dr. Spock taught my wife and I that we should raise these 2 kids of ours as if they were what the world revolved around. Most of them are successful, but they also are obnoxious people in one sense, because they really believe this, what Dr. Spock taught us to do. So what I'm saying is that this is different strokes for different folks, and whether it's called one-night stands or whether it's called adapt your process to fit the need, it is the answer for the survival of this wonderful traditional activity that we collectively call folk dancing, or at least we call square dancing, that part of it, modern Western square dancing. It's a shame, but I really believe that once these people get involved, then you can, in fact, bring them into a more traditional set. And I also believe that just like they do today, there's 5 to 10% of them that will not only enjoy it, but they'll find that the mental challenge they're looking for, and they'll go right on up the line. And that's wonderful. But for the most part, this group of people is more attuned to a mainstream basic concept, because they really don't want to get that involved with anything. And the way you let them get involved is exposing it to them. Absolutely right. Every adult exposure to the experience of square dancing means that person is 50% more likely to have a positive image, 50% more likely to be a prospective member for you, as opposed to having an experience as a 6th grader, particularly among men, was a very negative experience. It's liable to make you 50% less likely. So it's almost like if you were going to design this program from the ground roots, phase 1 would be nothing but one-night stands, to get as many people exposed in the adult community as possible. I mean, if you were going to design a theoretical program, you'd almost do that from the beginning. And then phase 2 would be to bring them into conventional meetings. Now, that's not because, that has nothing to do with because of what you do. It has to do with how the population changed. What they consider, what their needs are, and what their wants are, and what their desires are, and this is what compels this business of a target market is basically what they're looking for. It's a shame, but that's just the way it is. So you need to accept that. Out of the studies we did this year, and then I'll talk about the phase 2 aspect because they all tie together, is a really critical point, and this is that we now know, without question, and with really good documented studies, not just the studies we did, but studies that people have spent millions of dollars doing, that what has happened over the last 30 years absolutely is a no blame, no fault, no blame, no shame situation. And whether you recognize it or not,
within your own minds and within the minds of the dance leadership, there is a leftover residual of feeling guilty about what's happened to square dancing. And what I'm here to tell you, and this is the most important thing, is that nothing, hear me now, nothing anyone could have done would have changed what has happened to square dancing one iota. And this is an absolute truism. And you may say, well, if we'd have known, but no, because of the way the structure is, with no central authority, with independent organizations, with you people all being independent agents, with no home office, absolutely, you have nothing to do with what has happened. And you need to make sure that whenever you have the opportunity, you get that message across to square dance leadership. Because whether they acknowledge it, whether it's at the unconscious level or not, so many of these people have taken a defeatist stand. They have consciously or unconsciously said, well, I'm 65, I got about 15 more good years, and as I look around, I'll have a place to square dance. Now, they may not be saying that consciously, but they're saying that unconsciously. So this is another part of the problem that we have to deal with. We have to make these people understand that, one, they didn't do anything. In fact, the fact that square dancing even exists, as opposed to the 50% of all the social, civic, and religious organizations were started in the 40s and 50s, the fact that 50% of them don't even longer exist, the fact that we do and we still have a healthy core to work from, says an awful lot about this activity, an awful lot about the product. And so we should see it that way as a positive. Not only did we survived well. We grew in many senses of the term. And one of the areas which was so critical that you guys did in CALLERLAB, and I really credit the survival of square dancing primarily to this kind of structuring. Because if we hadn't, there wouldn't be any kind of structure. There wouldn't be anything to make this seem like a formal idea and opportunity. So it was a very critical move, and it was very important for the survival of square dancing. We have, in the phase 2 of this thing, we have to start exploring who our partners are going to be out there in the terms of the corporate world, because nothing in the next 20 years, or 10 years even for that matter, will exist in the way of leisure activities successfully that are not sponsored. It's another sad fact of life. But if you look around you, there are no more Orange Bowls. There's the Nesbitt Orange Bowl, or whatever it happens to be. The Rose Bowl, where I live in Pasadena, said, oh, well, they're so successful, they'll never have to get a sponsor. They got a sponsor last year. You know, they don't build arenas anymore. They build Staples Centers, or so-and-so, or whatever it happens to be in your community. It is a fact of life. And the reason is that the business of what people do with their leisure time and how they spend their leisure money has become very competitive. And other people who are competing for that same limited amount of time are out there getting the corporate sponsorship. To do this, we really need that consensus we're talking about, because when one of us walks in with an armful of package and we lay it on a Walmart's or a Ford or a Coca-Cola's desk, then we need to have as big a package, and we need to have a sense of, because what we're really selling is the opportunity for a marketing network for these people. And when we walk in and say, well, we got a 10,000 clubs and we've got a marketing network for you in every state in the country and 7 countries overseas, all in English. Wonderful. Well, think what you can do in cross-couponing and think what you can do in promotion. Well, if they don't have that sense of finding that when they go out and do their due diligence, then in fact they won't go for the program, because they're going to be asked to put literally over a time period millions of dollars into this activity. So that's the reason for consensus, and that's why it's important. To do that, we're well on the way. We're finding out who we are. We're finding out who our customer is. That's what these focus groups is about, so that we know ahead of time when we talk to the prospective sponsor, we can literally say, now we know this is our customer base, here's the demographics of the group. Now we're working programs through the school system to get some younger input to this demographics, because we don't have a good youth demographics, let's face it. And that's an important part for any sponsor. So we're balancing that out. We have UCLA, we have an extension class being offered this summer for the first time. 3 hours, UCLA, to all the teachers in California to teach them how to teach square dancing. And it's tied into the national convention. And I would expect that this program's probably going to grow, and we could do it in every state in the country. Because at one time, as you know, there was square dancing in all the colleges. And we think there's a good opportunity to get it back in there. Again, it helps us demographically show the youth side of our demographic base, which is critical. We also want to explore opportunities for public relations. And again, we need the consensus because, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned yesterday, or to some group I was talking about, maybe it was last night, the value of any public relations program lies not in the event, but it lies in how you disseminate that event on a national basis. And if we have good, effective public relations representative in each of these clubs, if something happens in anywhere that has value to report, then within 24, 48 hours, we need a system that lets this network publicize it in their local weekly paper, which they can do. And there's a lot of tricks in that, and that needs to be taught. So we will explore both the whole area of sponsorship actively now, and we will explore what we call good, positive public relations opportunities to do this. We will continue also doing this phase to seek ways to find avenues to communicate. We were, and I've used the analogy a lot, a wonderful big wagon train in 1970. We were all gathered in St. Louis to head out to California. The first 2 or 3 nights we had this big circle of wagons, and it was wonderful. Everybody danced and enjoyed and did this and that. We're halfway to California 30 years later, and when we camp at night, we have about 12 to 15 totally separate, small, tightly wagon circles out there, and they're getting further and further and further apart, which makes them more vulnerable to Indian attacks, makes them less able to work together to protect themselves and to grow and to defend their idea. And that's why this consensus is important. I think no one, until we really started about a year and a half ago to really move into this area, realized how tight those wagon circles have become. And they really are. A lot of you don't recognize this because you walk into a place and you get good accolades and you get accepted and honored for your work. But when you leave, they don't necessarily say the same thing about a CALLERLAB or a NEC or a Rounder Lab or anyone else. We're no different than anyone else. And yet, here is a logical place to have the leadership begin in this refurbishing, as you were, or refreshing of this activity, because you are the best organized, because you do impact this activity more than anybody else in it. You don't realize how critical, well, maybe you do realize, but you are absolutely the most essential part of this activity. If I had to keep one part and throw everything else away and start over again, you obviously know what I would do. It wouldn't be a club. It would be a caller, because we can always find a new structure for that club. That's the critical phase. But even as we say, and as Mike has said, we need to take a leadership role, we have to do this quietly, because there are people out there in these other tight wagon circles that really don't trust you. It's not that they don't trust you, it's that in this last 30 years, they've blamed themselves, and after you blame yourself for a while, you project it out and you blame other people. And so it isn't really about these circles being far apart. They really aren't, but perceptually they are. And that's the perception we have to work through. So we have to find indirect ways, in a sense, as an organization, to assume that leadership. And that's why it's a difficult task, but it's also the right place to be. And this is the right group to do it through. Are there any questions, or are we open for questions? Thank you.
We do have a remote mic, but we need to get everything on the tape. If anybody'd like to volunteer to move the mic around, that'd be great. You got one? We're open to questions, comments, whatever you would like to do.
Yeah, I really would like some input.
If you'd state your name and where you're from.
Rich Gierman, California. Most organizations that are going to spend a large amount of money on sponsorship generally are going to expect to get something back in return. What price sponsorship? How much of our souls do we have to sell to get that?
That's a good point. If you were talking about the sponsorship industry, and it is an industry, about $8 billion last year, is only about 10, 12 years old, believe it or not. It's brand new. In the first phase of sponsorship, they were just looking for what they call signatures. And there was a lot more of what you're talking about involved. They want to know how many times to get that Nike logo emblazed on that television screen at this thing. The industry has gone through 3 phases, and the current phase is very interesting. It is about associating your company and its products and its image with the right image out here who reflects and enhances it. They're not looking as much as they used to for this kind of part of your soul. And I understand the question. It's a very valid question. I really don't think that's going to be the problem we think it is in any way, because in this phase, we have more to offer a group, an outfit that's really... Walmart, for instance. I mean, Walmart's whole approach is to tie into the local community. And they sponsor everything from, what I'm proposing to them is, and they're building maybe 3 or 4 new Walmarts a month. Why don't you build a community room? Doesn't cost you much. The local Square Dance Association will monitor and act as a guest host in that room. Well, you see, you don't have to give money because they have another aspect. The other side of a sponsorship is what they call kind. And if they provided a nice facility, then you paid and it didn't cost you anything, they're making a nice contribution to your program. And the nights you weren't using it, it was used by, community groups, all kinds of community groups and stuff like that. But under the auspices of and the management of and the hosting of, as it were, a local association. So there's a lot of ways to get value out of a sponsorship. For instance, you can go to, if we had a sponsor that was in the process of doing a national advertising program. I see it all the time. And they just use the Square Dance instead of using something else. That in itself has great value for us. So the key really is to making sure that we interview and that we qualify the sponsor. And we have the right to do that, and we will do that. But the question is valid, and we must never subjugate the concept and image of what we are to who it is that we're sponsoring us. I don't think that's a big problem today because we have a unique image. We have heritage, which is wonderful because legacy concerns about losing heritage. No. These sponsors want to know that you've been associated as a byproduct or you've been a reflection of the American history story for the last 250 years. They want to know that. They want to use that. So it enhances what we bring to the table. Yes.
Jim Wass, Riverdale, Maryland. Mike, you earlier spoke about the dancer leadership becoming more flexible in many cases, like the example in Utah when the vultures were flying over all of their clubs. How might the dancer leadership be made receptive to doing other than just combining their teaching programs, but things such as sponsoring or co-sponsoring with caller leadership, one-night parties, or shorter entry programs as short as the CDP?
We're finding that's already happening in some areas out of necessity. Again, once clubs have gotten down to the point where they have to do something to either promote their lessons, in other words, have a fundraiser with a local church, and combine a one-night party and recruit from that. We're finding that out of necessity, some clubs are doing just that, having to be more flexible with the way that they've traditionally run their new dancer programs. And some of them are saying, let's make lessons totally casual. Let's do 2 lessons a week. We're finding that there's an awful lot of ways to change the traditional way of running a program, but most of this has happened currently, at least, out of necessity. And I'd like to see that just not necessarily out of necessity, but just because, hey, let's make this a little bit better, and we need to share that information with each other and share those success stories. Mike?
Wade Driver, Mesa, Arizona. Jim, somewhat hypothetical, somewhat not. If we were prepared at this time, or if we could arrange an interview or a sit-down session with a mega corporation that would be approved by the board, are we prepared at this time to make a presentation? And if not, when would that be? All right.
That's a real good question. The 2 ways to do this. One is really prepared, and the other is by necessity having to make some moves. And a year ago, what my goal would have been is to know, let's get all the demographics done from the clubs, and let's get this done, and let's get that done. Let's get this unification together so that the first guy, you see, the problem with making your presentation and you're saying we've got this wonderful network, they're going to go out and do their due diligence. These companies don't spend this kind of money. They don't associate unless they really do their homework. And then when I say due diligence, they'll know more about square dancing than you and I will know in a very short period of time. If the first person they go to happens to be, let's say, a disgruntled ACA executive or a leader, and they said, no, we don't go to that. Must have been that CALLERLAB bunch, Well, the guy will come back to me and say, Jim, it's a great idea. When you get everybody together, let me know. But it won't be another entry because you don't get more than one shot at these guys in the right way. So Wade's question is very valid, and I would say that the problem is that we do need an impetus now. We do need to get some kind of a positive thing. We think we have an approach to a new kind of an organizational structure, which we call an alliance of organizations, rather than foundations and rather than the National Council of Square Dance Organizations, which are all parent-related to some group. Rather than that, we think in the an alliance, which we call the arts, which is the alliance, which is great. Everybody wants to support the arts. And that stands, in our case, for Alliance for Round, Traditional, and Square Dancing. So it makes a nice an acronym to work with. But the core to your question is that if we feel we need some impetus now, we may have to go in there a little early. And that may mean we drop the ball on a couple of them. I have an appointment 2 weeks with one of the key guys at Dr. Pepper in Dallas, and one of the reasons I'm doing it there is because they're not the biggest house in town. If I blow it there, we still have Coke and Pepsi to go to. But we're going to, and we've got a youth program to tie into that. We're taking the same meeting, the same group. I'm talking with the head of the University of, it's called the University Hospital in Dallas, Texas, and they're tied in University of Texas. This Southwest Hospital is the largest single granted research center in the world. They get about $500 million a year. And what we're taking the approach to is that with the pandemic condition of obesity in our schools, we really need some alternative exercise programs. And so to do a dance exercise video where the core moves are basic square dance moves, dance moves. Maybe there's a Taibo kick thrown in, I don't know. It may not follow a particular list, but anyone looking at this video as I envision it will say only one word. Hey, that's square dancing. I don't care what you call it, that's square dancing. Well, if we do this the right way with a major university physical fitness department and with all the kinesiologists balancing out the muscle groups and all the calorie count, and then you test it within the schools that they automatically test these things through, and you walk into the Department of Health and Education with the senator on one arm and a lobbyist on the other arm, and with a sponsor like a Coke behind you, who definitely doesn't want to get kicked out of the schools, then I think you've got a good chance of saying to these people, look, we'd like some grant money because we know you're going to spend it in the next 5 years. We estimate there'll be about $5 billion spent just in trying to get this pandemic condition of obesity solved. Half of that problem lies in exercise, folks. And we should get our share of it, but we won't if we don't adapt this product of yours to a way that we can get it back into the youth market. And we gain immeasurably because with getting into the youth market, you don't get any membership increase. Let's face it, it ain't going to help you there. But it is a major step toward the image change because all the adults who'll see this being done and all the publicity coming out of it will, in fact, start to think about square dancing in a different way. And we know the kids don't care as long as we make it fun and it works. And we know the teachers will love it because square dancing as an exercise activity is so far superior to jumping jacks because it teaches kids to listen, which every teacher wants. And right now in California, there's a huge push toward multicultural activities. You can make square dancing multicultural as you want to because you can bring in a little Polish dance next month or bring in a little folklorico the following month. You don't care. But the core group, the core thing is a square dance. And so this part of it is important, and we'd love to have all that in place before we go to the sponsor Wade, but we may not have that opportunity because part of the reason we're having difficulty is the tightness of these wagon circles. And perhaps a good positive step forward through a prospective sponsorship could move and open some of these wagons to get back together. And that may be more important than whether we lose the round or two. That's where we're just trying to decide right now.
Just to follow up again, part of the goals and objectives of the Phoenix Plan is to create some unity in our activity. And that has been the most critical part over this last year, what a struggle this is going to be to create that kind of unity. And Jim's proposal to the board last night was that we might consider, instead of trying to do the legal things that we have to do to open up the board of directorship to try to get other organizations involved, and how do we get that group together to meet, how do we get that core group to be effective in a leadership role, let's consider creating a separate alliance altogether and not only ally ourselves with the groups that we see of Roundalab and CALLERLAB and USDA and Legacy and ACA and NEC not only those groups, but what about the National Dance Council? What about the groups that are out there that have been out there for years and years and are huge in the schools and in the exercise programs and the park and recreations? What about those groups that are out there? How can we ally ourselves with those groups who are already receiving grant money for exercise programs and the arts? How can we ally ourselves with those groups so that we can be part of that bigger picture of dance? The other thing that is going to be real critical in this whole factor is taking our own demographics. And as you saw, the Research and Development Committee right now is starting that program with a questionnaire, and they're working on that. So any input that anybody here has on questionnaires or any experience in that way, be sure to touch base with Terry Wheeler and the Research and Development Committee, because we need to get that out to clubs and out to our existing organizations so that we can present the picture to the prospective sponsor of what Square Dancer is all about. What's our age group? What's our income level? What are some of the incidentals about our particular dance population? So. Will.
Thank you, Mike. Will Eads from California. Jim, do we have some kind of an outline as to exactly how we're going to go about putting this whole picture together? Do we have certain goals we're going to meet by certain times or try to? Yeah. Do we have something that listed that we can physically look at and see what a time area we're going to try to reach these certain goals and how we're going to go about it?
Yes, this originally was laid out as a 10-year plan beginning this year. And the phase one is we got a good portion of it done this last year, but we didn't get a really important portion of it, and that was this communication fee, this whole unity aspect. We in that sense we failed to do that. We did get our research and our focus group done, and we're very comfortable with what we found out. It confirmed a lot of what you guys already knew, but it gave it validity. It gave it reality. It no longer is a question of a chat room discussion list argument about whether we need to simplify this activity. It isn't a matter of whether we need to. It's just that the people that you're going to be talking to they're going to be looking for one. It isn't that anyone's wrong on the other end. It's simply that you're not going to have that choice. You're not going to ever get a lot of these people to a plus level. In answer to your question, yeah, we have a pretty extensive program right here that we presented to the Board of Governors last night, and it's got in itself about 9 pages of goals. It's got objectives, and it's got the rationale for each of the objectives. And it has a time, not date time per se, but it does have this phase relationship. A part of the time factor depends on how well we do in each of these steps. It's just like Wade's question. I would love to not go in there until we have all this stuff put together. But we need a lot of dollars, and we need fundraising. I proposed when I first came here that we simply add a few dollars to a weekend festival, and that every club had a fundraiser dance once a year, and maybe even a nickel or dime added to the dance to the individual dance fee. And so far there hasn't been any of that take place. I estimated that we lost about $500,000 in funds over the last 2 years alone. So if we don't get that, because see, the problem is, who are you going to do? I mean, there is no home office. You guys either have to do it, and you're busy out making a living, for God's sakes. Who is going to do this work is primarily going to be outside professional ad people, public relations people, and marketing people. And you got to pay these people. You got to pay them. And so in raising funds, external funds and internal funds, we need that. How fast we move in the other direction in phase 2 items will to some degree depend upon how we're able to fund these movements, either through internal activity and internal work and participation, or through outside paid professionals. So it's difficult to put a time factor based on, it's like a PERT chart. If you don't get this step done, you can't move to the next step, and that's part of the problem. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. One other comment about that. The presentation you made to the board of directors there and the different steps that you'd like to take, is this going to be available to everyone, especially the people in the committees, the foundation committee?
Well, that leads me to tell you to come to the marketing committee meeting tomorrow at 10:45 in the Cleveland room, where you'll have the goals and objectives and the vision statement and mission statement in your hand. Much of how it will proceed, time-wise, as Jim said, will depend upon the funding we can raise. And that's all one of the reasons why the marketing committee and the fundraising committee are meeting at the same time. But there will be a marketing committee meeting before that time, and you'll have the goals and objectives there. We're soliciting input. You'll be able to see, step by step where we're going with each of the 3 phases of the Phoenix plan. Okay?
Thank you. One other question here from my partner, Judy Ballard.
I'm already introduced. I know that image and preconceived ideas are 2 of our worst enemies in square dancing. And I don't know how to overcome this. Recently, when we went to pick up our banner for the T-shirts, the first thing the lady said to Will was, "Hee-haw!" Like, that's her idea of square dancing. And sometimes people will stop us on the street and say, "Well, how do you add quality to your life?" And when we turn around and show them the back of our T-shirts, they just, "Oh." I don't know what the answer is to this. Also, you've changed the name to Modern Western Square Dancing. I was wondering, why not drop the Western? Modern Square Dancing. Square dancing in itself is Western. I don't know if that would make a difference. There's some way we've got to break this barrier, but people have their idea in mind, and I think that this is really a hurdle for marketing.
Judy, definitely. One of the biggest things that we've talked about from the very inception of the marketing plan was our image and what misinformation is out there on our image. And one of the things that is so critical in our market research is not only to determine who our target group is, but determine how can we reach them and what are the right buttons to push and what is the image that we have to overcome, and then how can we overcome that image. And it's not only going to take a tremendous amount of market research, more market research, but it's also going to take the interpretation of that research by professionals to figure out how we can change that image and how can we show a different side of our activity.
Jim Tremondelay from St. Louis. At one time I was the president of the Record Producers Association, and we launched a plan in conjunction with CALLERLAB that we would have a music awards presentation, and we would have the top caller for the year, the top mainstream caller, the top round dance cuer, and so on and so forth. And we went out and tried to market this project. We had the first question that we ever had when we came in to visit people, and we visited the president of Nakona Boot Company, some of the country western manufacturers. Their first question was, who is your champion? And we'd say, well, that's what we're going to determine. Nakona Boot Company was going to put out a whole ad campaign with our champion, him wearing Nakona boots. They were really excited about it, and the square dance community, when they found out about it, caused so much problems that we were asked to cancel the awards program. Now, this is the square dance community that we tried to explain to that we had a good marketing project there, and they said, well, it's competition. You're putting competition into square dancing. They're very narrow-minded in this respect. And although, if you hold two dances on the same night, you're running competition. But, it's one of those things. How are we going to get around this? And are we going to be able to market just an activity, or are we going to have to actually market our top callers and our top cuers and this type of thing?
For many years, as many of you know, we have thought inside the box. Square dancing is this inside the box. And I think we need to think outside the box a little bit. Many of you are aware of the Senior Olympic Games in Utah, and where they're actually developed a little way of competing, and they're having fun with it, and they're making it work, and it's a little bit different. There's probably some opinions on both sides of it, but once again, we need to look outside that box. That's the bottom line.
I have the mic, so I guess I'm next. Meg Ferguson from California, and I'd really like to encourage you to target the 20-year-olds. They have a longer dancing lifetime. My brother met his wife when he was square dancing, dropped out to raise his family, then came back and is still dancing in his 60s. And I dropped out. I started dancing when in my 20s, dropped out 5 years, came back, met my husband, and we have a very successful club. That's another point, but I'll get to that in a minute. The 50-year-olds are subject to injuries, illness. Their lifetime is shorter. So I would like to see us target the 20-year-olds. They're the ones that are interested in competition and sports, so maybe they would be interested in competition and square dancing.
This ends the front side of your cassette.
And they bought things, and through education in their stores, they were able to do projects faster. Home Depot has a whole series of training things on how to lay floor tile, how to put down carpet, how to paint, how to do all these things. And I thought it would be great to have a commercial that had a family say, man, we finished that project really fast.
We got time for square dancing.
And we had time to go square dancing.
That's right.
And then show them at a square dance.
And as I remember your email, because I had it saved, and unfortunately I got a worm that wiped out all my email folders. But as I remember that email, you said their budget had already gone in for that year.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they were not negative to it. They were positive to it.
Of course they're not, because you've got a sellable product, and it's back to someone's question about the sponsor's image. There is more and more of these companies that are not just looking to get a quick return on a name, or what they call impressions, or they call them signatures, X number of signatures. They are really looking for the long-term relationship with image. And folks, you got the best image of anything around. I mean, I said originally, it's the most politically correct, healthiest social activity in the world. And political correctness is more important today than quality of performance on the nature of a product. Being politically correct is almost in the first category of whether or not people, the manufacturers, consider their product. It's a critical issue. Yes, somebody in the back. Yeah. Absolutely. In other words, there's so many ways to adapt a sponsorship. Someone dancing on a special kind of floor, and the sponsor, the manufacturer of that floor. I mean, wouldn't it be pretty to have a bunch of square dancers and that damn elephant you see all the time walking across? You know what I'm talking about? You've seen the elephant holding up the floor. Maybe that's not a good analogy, because that may mean forget it.
How many saw the advertisement, the one-page advertisement in People magazine? This older square dance couple, Whitman's Candy, embracing each other on the dance floor with dancers somewhat in the background back there, but just looking at each other's eyes. But it was in black and white. It was an old, you looked at this thing, and of course the box of Whitman's that was out there kind of in the forefront was in color and stuff. But I thought, we can do better than this. We can do better than this.
Let me just tell you, though, what you have to be prepared to do that. Hollywood is constantly looking for things, but the people who do this successfully have a whole library full of different shots of square dancing, for instance, or whatever their product they're trying to sell. They have this prepared ahead of time. It's all cataloged. They have stock photos. They have stock this. They have stock that, which, again, because there's no central home office, we've never put together. I've had 2 films that I've asked requests for contacts that I know, and I don't have that I don't have the material. I don't have the material to offer them, and these guys don't wait. They're out doing something else. But ultimately, that's what, again, one of the deep phases is we need to be talking to everybody down the line about. I have 2 or 3 other wild ideas along that line in terms of a musical, in terms of a documentary, in terms of a lot of stuff, all of which tend to go together, but which take time to do. Yes.
I've got 2 things. One is a competition. I would like to propose that there be a national youth championship at the national convention every year, dance off of the state top youth callers, cures, square dance teams, round dance couples, and things like that. I was approached because the northwest part of this country has an excellent competitive youth program going. And I would like to see that go across the country, sponsored by the callers, and brought to the national so we could have a national dance-off. What? Oh, I'm the general chairman of the 51st National Square Dance Convention in St. Paul next year. Jay Richards. Mike Dice. I've got one more thing I would like to propose, a challenge to you. You spoke about the challenge of the callers leading, providing the leadership. The National Convention needs more involvement from your organization, because I'm expected to come here in these 2 days and personally ask each caller to come to St. Paul. There's no mechanism for me to hit the callers in a group fashion here. At least I have not been told of one. And I would love to do this because I need more involvement, because we are getting turned down by callers now because they don't see any financial advantage of coming to the biggest square dance event of the year for them.
There will be, on the Wednesday morning session, there will be a chance for all the VIPs to get up on the mic and speak, and you at that time can make a personal invitation, talk to the whole body at one time if you like, and as well as walk around in each one of these sessions and talk to each individual caller and partner. And like I say, you'll have the attention of the entire convention body here on Wednesday afternoon at our general meeting. Maybe you can have some. Oh, that's a shame. That's really a shame. Yeah, that's right. We were just talking about the opportunities for all the organization, the VIPs, to talk on Wednesday morning, and yes.
I'm Terry Wheeler from San Antonio, Texas, and chairman of the Research and Development Committee. In the process of marketing, which we do have some very fine people that have been brought into this to guide us through something we're not experienced in. The other half of the marketing, though, has to go back to the dancers currently in the system. Our area has a lot of dancers that have been there for years. They like it the way it is. When we talk about modern square dancing, I have heard modern square dancing since the day I got into it in 1975. Only problem is, we're not beyond 1975. We mentally have to take our dancers. Now, I can picture myself going back to our dancer association and trying to encourage them to come out of 1975, 1980. And I'm not going to have a lot of luck because I'm one person. I have tried for years to bring them forward, and they do move slowly. But the marketing, and I task CALLERLAB and all other large entities that are in favor of moving us forward to try to get information, statistics, material, encouragement out to the dancer associations, and to give us callers who are willing to back this personally as representatives to our associations the information and the push to convince these people to help us with funding. If I go back and use Jim Hensley's idea, every dance you collect money on, collect an extra 50 cents, let's send it to the foundation, they're going to look at me and go, are you kidding? That's more money. So, we need that backing. Just my word is not good enough.
I just kind of, both Ms. Wheeler and Mr. Richards have again pointed out the difficulty there is to communicate intra-channels and intra-wagon groups. It's the single biggest deterrent we have. Absolutely, I think if you gave me a year with CALLERLAB or with NEC or with anyone else, I guarantee you this is an enlightened group up here called CALLERLAB Leadership. A year ago, their views have changed, not just because of me, but because they've been forced to look at some stuff. They're very forward-looking now. But we don't have, if there's 12 groups, we don't have 12 years for me to spend a year with every one of them. So we have to find a way to get this communication. It is adamant that we do this, and that's one of the goals I have this year, and one of the things that the Board of Governors is working on right now is trying to find a way to get that across. I have no doubt that if these groups that you speak of, Ms. Wheeler, had a nice video that showed this, and someone introduced it in a way that made sense, that they would have no problem in adding $1 or $2 or $3 at the festival, because we see people walk out of grocery stores, or we have people buying things when there's only 20% of that money going to some charitable organization. People actually buy just so they can get that 20% to them. We're talking about people who have a vested interest in this activity, and who would see no problem doing a once-a-year fundraiser or adding a couple of bucks to a festival. I said this last year. I spent $50 at Bakersfield and had a ball all weekend. The next weekend, I spent $250 at a seminar in Los Angeles and had a miserable time. And if you tell me that I wouldn't have spent $55 to go to Bakersfield if I understood, and if there was a nice little plaque statement, by the way, $5 of this goes to, boom, keep this activity alive. We have people who are doing really good jobs in fundraising, for instance, for cancer or some other form, and they use this vehicle. Well, if the vehicle's not there, they can't do the cancer fundraising. So we need to think about making sure we protect the vehicle also. But we have a communication problem. But we're trying to solve that. We're talking now about a video that would be available in the hinterlands. But again, without this authority, who's going to make that happen? A caller is an employee. They have a conflict of interest. We can't ask you guys to go out there and push something down somebody's throat, because you want to be hired next year, and gigs are getting less all the time. So, I understand that. So maybe it's not fair to even ask you to do this part of this channel. And this is part of what we're all trying to fight with right now. We're really trying to understand the problem. We took off on this vision. I should say. And we didn't fully understand all the ramifications of the problem. And a lot of people told me that. Bill Hyman told me that. A lot of other people told me that. And I just so caught up with the vision that I can just see this thing. I know what we got. But we really have to bring everybody along with us. And you've made that point, and Mr. Richards has made that point very well.
Chuck Jaworski, Chicago, Illinois. You mentioned about stock footage and so forth for videos. A local hospital in our area has been showing on television for over a year a beautifully produced commercial about square dancing, and the whole tie-in is that one of the people dancing has had both hips replaced. Are you suggesting that we have access to those kind of videos, that we send them to the foundation to develop stock?
Amen.
Okay.
Amen. And anything anyone has that could be usable. Oh, I've got a great voice. I don't. Tape. Oh, I'm sorry. Tape. Anything. This is my most difficult factor. We're about ready to do teaching kids at UCLA. Teachers how to teach kids. We have yet to find a curriculum. We have a couple of them. People have helped. We got a new curriculum. I know that's up for approval this time. But it's so difficult. We got a story right here about somebody's success. A few questions back. We should know about that in a summary form. There are other successes down in San Diego County that are doing a good job. There's other areas. Why don't we have a manual of these? Why don't we have this available? We're going to teach an academy for leadership academy at the convention in Anaheim in a couple of months. We need a collection of the good things and the positive things, and the studies. I tried for a year to just get a hold of one research study. I tried for another year to get where this "you live 10 years longer" came from. And there was a study somewhere, but we can't even communicate enough to get these positive. Amen. We need anything you've got. And that's the concept of what the foundation was, a collection point, a clearinghouse, as you would. We really need that. Sorry, I didn't mean to make
This is Otto again. Let me, I talk too much, but people don't understand. Stock footage is money, and the foundation can use a lot of money. I sold some of my stock footage to Simon & Schuster for an educational book. They bought my footage for $300 a minute. And it's just money. And by the way, I can send you cases of footage, okay?
Yeah, we'll take the 300 instead.
Wade Driver, and I'm going to change subjects again. I'm going to go back to, where'd Terry go? Terry, where'd you go? She left. Well, all right. and maybe I'm hoping I'm not putting words in her mouth, but I think one of the things she's getting across or attempting to say is that a lot of things are the same since '75. Now, we go back to our clubs and we tell the dancers, we want you to do this, and we want you to do that, and we want you to donate money for this and so on. And every time we go back, we'll say, what do you want? Well, we want a change in the style of dress. We want friendlier callers. We want friendlier dancers. We want easier teach methods. And so we go back and call it, what'd you do? Well, we redefined cross trail through. Does that help you a lot? If we want them to do for us, friends, we better start listening to what they want from us. We better start doing it.
Hi, Will Eads from California again. You mentioned San Diego County. I would like to let you folks know that we are responsible for one of the clubs down in San Diego for contributing heavily to the foundation, and I want you to know that it's the easiest thing in the world for all of us to do. Believe it or not, we have not had one person say that they wish they didn't have to do that. And what I'm saying is everyone that comes to any of our dances at the Sundown Squares pays 50 cents extra admission, and it all goes to the foundation. And this has been going on now for over a year, and I think they contributed somewhere around $180 a month. We're very, very proud of that fact. You know, we are the real leaders of this square dance world. Without the callers, square dancing is dead. This is a love of activity that all of us are dearly, dearly into because we like it and we want to see it happen. And we can make it happen. If we can put together from every club 50 cents per person that comes through the door, within 1 year we could make a drastic difference in the way square dance is perceived. But if we sit back and just let everybody else do it, nothing is going to happen.
You know, it's interesting. This is a real success story with Will and Judy. They've been able to well, I think they're one of the only clubs that we know of in the United States that has really been able to pull this off and make this happen. Originally, when we started this, we figured that, well, it would be simple to add $1 or $2 to the registration of every single festival, every single jamboree, every single state convention, every single national convention, just $1 or maybe $2 to the registration per person to go to promoting and marketing square dancing. And that was our vision initially when we started. We thought, well, a lot of the clubs are hurting. They're struggling a little bit with the facilities, and so consequently we put a burden on the clubs to start with that phase of the program so early on. Well, Will and Judy jumped right in there and said, we're going to do it, and they did it. And they have been doing it ever since, well, it's been over a year. You guys have been doing this now.
Yeah, with one other comment, too. The same club started out as pretty much as a struggling club because they have become involved in a foundation effort. And I preach to them almost every week. Tell them how much the foundation, preach what we're doing for those. Those people are actually very, very glad to be able to pay the extra 50 cents to come there and dance. And we not only get it from the classes as well as the dances. And this is an opportunity. If every one of us went back to our clubs and asked them for even 25 cents more, nobody's going to hesitate giving you a quarter more. They're not going to say a word about it, especially if they know it's for the good of square dancing.
I'll tell you, yeah, my hat's off to you, Will. Both you and Judy have done a great job with that. Back as early as 1985, CALLERLAB had representatives meeting with the NEC. Our push was to try to add $1 to the registration of every person that attended a national convention, and we just still have not been able to accomplish that. So our goal still is to take every single festival, every single jamboree, every single state convention, every single national, or all the national conventions, just add $1 to the registration, and let's market square dancing. Let's get some professional people involved with this marketing, and let's really do something.
Yeah, my name's Marlon Muller. I'm program chairman for the 51st National Convention, and we'll be glad, with my chairman's permission, we'll be glad to stay for your Wednesday morning meeting and present. But that's not my main point. I'm in an area, I'm one of these dumb ones that we're starting a club because I don't like to drive 64 miles to my home club. What can you do in a small town situation? We live in the middle of nowhere. We have a town of 1,700 people. We fortunately have a caller who we haven't paid in 2 years to give us lessons because he wants a club closer to his house. So we're real fortunate that way. But your emphasis is on the larger metropolitan areas. You know, where they say, well, an extra quarter. You know, we pay for a hall. $20 a night. $20 isn't much to a lot of people, but 2 squares, $20 is a lot of money. 2 or 3 squares. What can you guys do to help us? You know, clubs are folding all over. We're trying to do something different. How can you guys help us develop a club?
There's a couple things you can do is to once again think outside the box of how you get new dancers. Can you run fundraising dances with your local churches, with your YMCA? Can you raise funds for YMCAs by holding a one-night dance party and recruiting from those people? Can you make those one-night dance parties an integral part of your club, a fundraising part for your club? Can you tap into the homeschooling programs in your communities? Because homeschooling is becoming huge, and some clubs are literally using their class nights as physical education requirements for the homeschooling people in their community. So consequently, their classes include about half of school-age kids from 12 to 17, and then they bring their parents along. We're finding that clubs are literally building their groups by tapping into that market. So thinking outside the box of what we traditionally think as our classes will help your club to grow and build and create a new dancer program where your new dancers may not go all the way to, say, the mainstream program or the plus program, but they'll be out there dancing, and some of those people will indeed become part of your club.
Yes, Gene Triplett, Charlotte, North Carolina with the NEC. For the past 2 years, we have made contributions to the foundation, and just wanted to bring that out. But also, we have a group of dancers in Charlotte several years ago got together and wanted to do something to promote square dancing. And last year, they held a dance in Charlotte called the Queen City Ball. And we had 84 squares for this, and they contributed to the foundation $8,405 from this dance. And the year before that, they had one that was called a castaway dance, I think it was, and there was like $3,700 that was contributed. So the dancers are getting out and doing this, and we have groups that are working together. But I think the thing is, the dancers would now like to start receiving some information back on where this money is going. Because every time I stand up at our federation and ask them to do something, they say, that's fine, we don't mind doing it, but tell us where you're spending our money and what we're doing. So we need this information back with reports, something like that, so we can tell them what they're doing.
Exactly. This convention is kind of our beginning point at announcing some of this research that we've gotten, because over the last couple of years with the internet research and the focus group studies, much of that money has gone into that market research. And so this is kind of the starting point. One of the snags we're finding, though, and we found this... Yeah, that's why Marty is here, isn't it? Because part of our funds went to funding this research, and so we're just now getting that material out to the general public and to the dancer population. But part of the problem that we're finding is that our network of communication is incredibly poor. We find that a good number of dancers out there don't get their regional magazines, they don't get the national magazine, and those many of those that do don't read what's in there anyway. It's really, we're having a difficult time in disseminating that information, and that's one of the objectives of the Phoenix Plan, is that we need to expand our communication network in square dancing within our leadership and within the clubs and organizations, so that we can get this material out.
Hey, Mayor from Minnesota. I have a few comments that I'd like to add. I know it's getting late, but one thing is, I think we should open up our session at St. Paul that you've got for prospective leaders to teach people how to dance. I think that's opened up for a $500 fee, I think it is. I think that should be lowered or free and open it up to Phi-Ed teachers. They are the ones that are exposing these people to dances way before we ever get a hold of them. And if they have a little bit of knowledge, that could be dangerous. Maybe they'll even dance. I've had sessions with these teachers myself, with different focus groups, and they've worked remarkably well with me. They want to know how to teach these kids how to dance, but there's no tool out there for them. And the other thing is, I've had sessions with the kids themselves doing grand squares and everything else. It was really taxing to do 7 sessions in one day with 8th graders, believe me. But we did it, and they had fun. But I think we should lower our limits, or maybe make it free for that session, and open it up for those Phi-Ed teachers. They're the ones that are exposing these kids to square dancing long before we ever even see them.
You know, what we're doing with UCLA in doing exactly that with the convention this year is that's where the teachers are going to be taught for 3 days. We're teaching kids now in the UCLA's own elementary school, and they will be the angels for kids who have not been taught. We'll teach the teachers in the morning, and then we'll guide their teaching of kids in the evening and the afternoon sessions. And there's nothing to keep University of Minnesota from tying that same kind of program together with what you're talking about. And these teachers walk away with 3 credit hours from UCLA. They've gotten rid of their requirement for extension education. And in the process, we've exposed new kids and new programs and new teachers. Now, we don't think those teachers are going to wind up taking any jobs away from you guys, but the idea is that we have started the process back in the schools, and what would be ideal for what you're asking is simply make the same presentation at the University of Minnesota, and you've got a reason for those teachers to show up.
Is the gentleman that has the mic the last one you have on your rotation? That you know, you have one more. We'll do those very, very quickly. Thank you for handling the mic, okay? Mike Hogan.
Okay. Jerry Wright from Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'll keep this short. The first thing I want to say was make a comment on the homeschool. If you have homeschool in your area, folks, that's the place to go. They're looking for stuff to do. We opened up in York, Nebraska. We had a set of lessons, and they advertised lessons, and the first night when they came, we had about 7 or 8 kids walk through the door with a couple of 3 mothers. And they said, we're here to take lessons. And of course the club, looked and said, what are we going to do? And they came to me and they said, what should we do? I said, we teach them. But I said, the first thing we do is mother gets to help. And next week I want all the mothers here. Within 5 weeks I had all the mothers, all the dads, and the kids. And we graduated that whole group. The other thing that I wanted to say was about getting this marketing information back to some of the areas. You could do that through your direction. All of us that are members here get that direction. And if you'd put a brief outline in there, we could take it to the clubs or to the local organizations and have it printed and put it out to them.
Okay.
I would like to answer your question about the University of Minnesota. For 2 years, we've been trying to find a college in Minnesota to sponsor this program. We've gone to the university, all the state universities, and a number of private ones, and we have not found any support. Why? Because it falls under a category called continuous education, and they don't think that's important in that particular division. The assistant education chairman has been responsible for this, and we would love to do it.
Thank you, Jay. I thank all of you for coming out. I commented to Mike a minute ago that the level of understanding and sincerity in your questions amazed me. I appreciate the kind of support that you showed just in your questions and the concern that you have and the level of understanding for the problems, and then some of you had input for the solutions as well. It was fantastic. This session repeats this afternoon. If you care to come back, we'd love to have you. If you'd just like to send somebody in that didn't come to this one, I hope that you got something out of it. The amount of work that Mike as a committee chair and Jim as our foundation director do is more than I can actually convey to you. There's no way to explain to you the amount of work that both of them do. Would you give them a nice hand and have a pleasant lunch?